John is our out-of-state speaker that has come down here to talk to us. We'll let him go first. You heard about where he's at now. He's going to tell us about how he got started in the hay business. So, John?
Thank you, Ray. I didn't grow up in a farm family, but I always loved equipment. I think I already mentioned that. But I was working as an auto mechanic in high school and out of high school, and worked for a year as an auto mechanic or a truck mechanic. And I was offered a job to raise livestock or help a guy, or actually raise livestock for a guy. It was a builder developer that bought a farm and he wanted to be a farmer. So I started raising some livestock for him, and I worked for him for close to 10 years. And we were buying the hay, we were buying the straw, and after about a year I said, why don't we, I had worked I baled hay and straw as a little kid for a farmer. I said, why don't we just bale our own hay and straw? And he didn't really want to buy the equipment, but he said, if you buy the equipment, you can bale the stuff and sell it to the farm. So I started baling a little bit of hay for the farm, started baling straw. I bought a $300 Oliver 62T baler and two $100 wagons, and I borrowed a neighbor's steel wheel hay rake the first couple of years. So we started making a little bit for the farm, and we were seeing where it was could make a little bit of money. So we started, baling a little bit more, and every year I'd build 2 more hay wagons, buy new running gears, and build wagon beds and stuff. And eventually we realized that there's some money in this, and he started to develop that farm, and I didn't want to live in the middle of a development. We lived on the farm. So we worked there about 9 years. We moved off the farm, bought our own place, and made it in hay and straw from there. So we started baling straw originally. It was our main thing. I could buy we didn't have any ground. We weren't renting any ground. But we were able to go bale straw. Guys would windrow it for us, and we baled it paid them so much a bale and baled straw. And we just kind of kept building and building the operation by doing that. And we really never borrowed any money. We just kind of, as we went, didn't want to take a chance on borrowing a lot of money and not be able to pay it back. So we just kind of built our operation from that by not borrowing any money. The only thing we ever really borrowed money for was for land, and that was quite a few years later. So we just kind of kept adding equipment every year, investing what we had, and build it up from there. So today we're about 750 acres of hay. We bale 1,200 to 2,000 acres of wheat straw a year, and this last year that was a little over 220,000 bales. That would be somewhat typical. If we have a dry year, it's not going to be that much. But it's just hard work and investing back in the business. So I guess, and I've been asked this question, I think you guys want to talk about this a little bit, maybe it's later, I don't know, but is it harder to get into the business today than it was back when we did it? I truly believe it's easier today than it was back when we did, and I say it's because of social media, the internet. You can learn so much, and it's not all correct stuff, but you can learn a lot from that. The markets are a lot easier to find, just like the young gentleman, Ellis Deweese, pointed out earlier today. You can find markets easier. Back when I started, it was through brokers, and you really had to build your business, you had to build a reputation, and that takes a long time. I still am a big fan of building a reputation to build the business. I don't really have any issues. I don't have to figure out if a guy's going to pay me or not. I guess because they're coming to me because they want our hay through our reputation. And I don't want to sound like I'm full of myself. It's not that. But they know they've heard of us in the business. They know that we're going to be good for it. So I don't really, why a new customer, which we don't really take that often, and I don't want to sell somebody just one load. I'm looking at all long-term relationships. But when we start out, they wire the money to us for the first several loads till we feel comfortable that we're going to get our money. Because I don't really know about them, but generally speaking, they would know about us. That I don't really advertise, or very little advertisement. So it's really word of mouth, and they've heard of us. So I guess I don't think that they're that concerned about us providing what we say we're gonna. It's more, I don't know them. And we do have a website, and I think that helps legitimize our business with some people, but most of our business comes word of mouth. But to do it that way, it takes a lot of years. So social media, I think is a good tool, but then you've got to deal with, is this guy for real or not? Is this guy going to pay me or not? So I think I'll pass it on to Clayton.
How did you get into the hay business, Dave?
Okay, I grew up on a dairy and tobacco farm. That's what my dad done, and that's what I did when I first started on my own. And I didn't like the tobacco end of it. But as a young farmer, I go to the bank and I asked to borrow some operating money, and they had one question: how much tobacco you got? So I had to have tobacco to borrow money. But to start it in the hay business, my first hay baler cost $600. When I started on my own, I had 2 flatbed wagons. The hay baler had the chute on the back of it, and I'd let the hay slide back on the wagon until one fell off. And I'd get back and stack however many I had, and I'd go another few feet until another one fell off. I learned to put some boards on the side of the wagon that helped them hold on a little longer. So that's kind of the way I started. Some of the things that helped me get me going was we started doing some custom work. We would cut hay for other people. We'd bale hay for other people, roll hay for other people. We started chopping silage all over a long distance. And that helped me to get better quality equipment to do a better job on my own hay fields. So that was one thing that helped to get me started in the hay business. Marketing was extremely tough. And nobody, if they didn't know you, they didn't trust you. And that was a hard thing. It's took me a long time to build a reputation to be able to sell hay to some pretty important people. So that's been a long thing. Do I think a young person could get started in the hay business today? Absolutely, yes. No doubt about it. Now, can you start with a brand new tractor and a brand new hay baler and build big fancy barns? I don't think so. I didn't. I started with a lot less, and me and Molly was married 14 years before we had our own house. We done without lots and lots and lots of things to get where we're at today. And today we are cutting with 3 self-propelled windrowers, raking with 3 rakes, tethering with 3 tethers, baling with 6 balers, and running 3 bale wagons. But it's took us 40 years and 3 months now to get where we're at. And can it be done? Yes. Will you have to do without a few things? I think you absolutely will. But maybe you can do a better job than I can and get there quicker than I did. And that's totally possible also. But I think if you want to do it, there's no doubt you can get started in the hay business today. It's a good business to be in. I'm often asked why am I in the hay business. I have the same answer every time. If you're the best corn farmer in the state and you do the best job, and I'm some crappy corn farmer, when we take it down here to the South Union, it brings the same dollar. If I've got some long-haired, shabby steers and you got the nice, fattest, slickest ones in the world, yours brings 10 cents more than mine. If I've got top quality alfalfa hay that I can sell to a thoroughbred farm in Lexington, it'll bring triple what a normal run-of-the-mill hay bale will bring. So in essence, you get paid for doing a good job. That's why I'm in the hay business.
In 1984, I would have been 21 years old, and we went bankrupt in the 80s. I helped load all of our equipment on trailers, and it went to a sale along with about 10 other farms in Simpson County. And when you do that, that really affects the way you see things. And from that point on, we lost our home. But the bank didn't even want the home farm. They said, well, we'll let you stay there, and if you can come up with a down payment, we'll sell it back to you in a year. And so I dropped out of college, and my dad got a job driving a truck, and with that year, we was able to put a down payment to buy our house back, so we never had to move out of the house. And but I wanted to farm, so, but, you know, everybody says, well, you can't do it. Well, I saw an opportunity in the straw business. And so I taught my dad and my granddad into dropping the straw on the ground, and they cut me a really good deal. Back then, the going rate for straw dropped on the ground behind the combine was 25 cents a bale. They charged me 50. And I said, I'll take that deal. And I bought the baler. We had a bunch of old wagon running gear back in the woods. I pulled them out and built wagon beds on them. And the preacher at my church was my same age, and I hired him and a couple other guys. And we thought the straw was going to make about 4,000 bales that year, and it made 8,000. And my wife said after we got done, she said, "You'll never sell all this straw." And I said, "I've got a plan." And I got a job at Nashville Ford Tractor. I asked the guys that owned it, they were country boys. I said, "Do y'all mind if I try to peddle my straw?" And they said, "Yeah, that's fine." So that's what I did. But what I did, besides handing out cards, is I went to all the landscapers in that area and garden centers, and I said, "I don't want to be your main straw supplier. I want to be your backup guy. When that guy can't get it here, call me. In the spring, when that guy runs out, call me." And within a year, I'd kicked all them guys out, and I was the main straw supplier. And because I would get up in the middle of the night to go deliver a load of straw. And that's how I slowly eased into my market. And I'm like I said, I just started with old equipment and slowly built up. And every few years, I'd get a little bit better truck. And the delivery is what made my business and still does. My trucks make as much as the hay business makes. And I'd like to quit driving a truck, but I'm just too greedy to let that go yet. But that's how I got started, and I think that's all I had to say.
Brad, go ahead since you haven't spoken, reintroduce yourself and then talk about how you got started.
I'm Brad Hines from Magnolia, Kentucky. I'm farming in Hart LaRue in Greene County, but I grew up on a dairy farm, and my family had, and that's where I learned how to work. But I took more interest in the tobacco, so started growing tobacco, as a teenager, and then sharecropping. And then once I bought my first farm, I got into the grain business and tobacco. But I'm 2 years without tobacco, so I guess you can say I'm tobacco free now after 25 crops. But growing the tobacco, I had to get into the H2A program, and we've done that for 10 years to be able to have the labor. So I had a landowner approach me wanting alfalfa he was a big deer hunter, and I kind of fell into the alfalfa business because I was originally going to roll it for a few cows, but my father-in-law had a square baler, and I was able to use it and had a neighbor that was hauling to Georgia to feed stores, and got to loading his trailers, and then I don't know, it just grew from there. I got to adding about 50 acres every year, and then we've got to use my H2A labor. And since I was in the grain and the wheat, I started baling my straw since I had the hay equipment. But I guess we got 10 years doing alfalfa, and we're doing about 500 acres now. So it's replaced tobacco for us. We have went to the bale barn, and works good because our tobacco barns have 16-foot wide driveways, and we're 2 bundles wide, and we took out 1,500 tiers last year and got a lot of room for hay and straw now. So, and then got to taking a lot of straw to Lexington, and we've been able to develop some markets up there with the hay because of the relationships with the straw business. But I haven't done any advertising. Mostly the people buying my hay and straw has kind of pushed me to do more. And one guy in Florida, I'd took him hay about 8 years. He's always wanting a little more, and it's kind of had a few acres each year, and it's been good for us.
I'm going to ask a question and then open it up to people. But if you were to get started all over again, what's a piece of advice that you would give your young self to do? Kind of like either something that you did well I'm glad I did that, or something that you wish you had done. And we'll just pass it down. What's that one piece of advice, Brad? Or one of the pieces of advice?
I just keep trying to find something you really like to do, and you can do a good job at it.
Very good.
I've had some really good people work for me, and my advice to myself would be hold on, but, well, like I said, but they're not with me anymore, and would be hire good people and keep them, and paying them what they're worth and a little more isn't a bad investment.
I think probably the most important thing to me and something that I've concentrated on is quality. Put up the very, very, very best hay you can. Don't take any shortcuts on quality. I'd rather have a few bales of really good hay as a barn full of not so good hay.
Clayton just stole mine. That is,
You're number two.
okay, yeah, no, quality is far more important than quantity by a long shot. One other thing, I guess, if I were doing it over again, I wouldn't be quite as afraid to borrow money for equipment. People can get themselves in trouble, but I think we could have grown ourselves a lot faster and easier if we would have taken a little bit more chance and borrowed money on equipment. I wouldn't go overboard, but I see some young guys start out today, and they're using the bank to get themselves going, and they're growing way faster than we could. A lot of that has to do with being able to borrow money and build the business faster.
So let me open it up for questions. It may be to an individual, or it may just be an open question for everyone to comment on it. And again, this is get into the hay business, so don't feel like your question is like, oh, that's a dumb question, I want to ask it. You go ahead and throw it out there. A lot better to throw it out here than to try something and it really not be a good idea. Yes. So the question is, to John and Clayton, with growing hay and selling it to high-value horse owners, have they ever had any liability issues?
For me, when I got to where I was starting to sell to some high-value horses and higher-end markets, I did start getting concerned about that, and I do have a good liability policy. But at that time, if you became a National Hay Association member, you got a liability policy through the association. And that was a big draw for me. So I actually joined the National Hay Association partly for that. That was actually a big factor in joining. Today, that liability is gone. There were too many problems with blister beetles with Western producers. They had to get rid of the policy. But I'm really glad I did that because I had no idea what the National Hay Association had to offer, and it's way more than an insurance policy. That has been a big factor in how we've progressed over the years. But I have, I think, a $2 million liability policy, and the other answer to your question is I've never been sued or had any claims against me. I've been very fortunate. I did have a customer one time that was just irate. He sent me the money. I sent him the hay. I had been sending him second, and I said, the only thing I have left is first. Send him this load of first. And his secretary said they wanted the first would be fine. He came completely unglued that I sent him first cutting without even mentioning it to him. Very fortunately, his secretary and I had been texting back and forth. He threatened me with a lawyer on the very first phone call. I forwarded him those texts that were between him and his secretary. He apologized, and that was the end of it. But boy, you really got to cover yourselves. And I just was very lucky at that time. But no, I've had no trouble. That would be the worst thing I've had so far. No.
I also have a really large insurance policy. I'm always nervous about selling hay. I was on a farm one time, and I asked them, what is an expensive horse on this farm? And they pointed to two mares that was insured for $16 million each. So, yeah, that makes me extremely nervous. We pay real close attention to our hay. If we've got hay that we're worried about, it's a totally different place, and we do different things with that. My son has a lot of beef cows, and we don't have to sell low-quality hay to high-dollar horsing, and I've never had a problem. We have sent out a few bad bales. Our policy is if you get a bad bale, send it back or tell me about it. We'll take care of it. We always have. We've got really, really good communication with all of our customers. I think that's important. But we've never been sued or threatened to sue or even had a problem. Most of the time they'll say, well, there was 2 bad bales on that load, but we done something with them and that's not a problem, just letting you know. That would be our normal response to something bad. But if you sell a customer 20 semi-loads a year and they get 2 bad bales, they're not going to get too excited about it. Now, if they open up the trailer and half of them's bad, it's probably not going to be a good day.
Dennis, you want to comment, or Brad?
Well, I had that idea about 20 years ago, and I just went to my insurance agent on my farm policy and asked him, and he said I was covered, and I'm on those $60 million horses. I would have told him, well, I'm glad you got them insured, because I don't. But yeah, your farm policy covers a lot of that liability. Because horses will die, according to the owners, from corn shucks, oak leaves, anything that's in that bale. They want you to bale hay in a vacuum.
I've had to take hay back, but as far as I know, I haven't killed a horse yet, so.
When do you fertilize your alfalfa?
We fertilize after the first and the third cutting, because we plan on getting 4 cuttings, but sometimes we get 5 or 6.
And is that, what are you putting on then, Brad? Is that maybe the potash, or you're putting on?
We take our soil test recommendations and we split it. We put half of it after the first cutting and the other half after the third.
We're talking for you, doing the business, we're talking alfalfa, so you don't need to apply nitrogen because it's making its own. It would be a little bit different if you're growing grass hay. And so, actually, you growing grass hay? Mitchell, what do you do there?
The majority is alfalfa orchard grass, so we're putting DAP and potash, and we'll get a little nitrogen from the DAP, which helps that second cutting orchard grass too.
I put mine on the fall when I'm done cutting, and I just do a replacement. I pull soil samples every 2 or 3 years, but I just figure up how many pounds of hay I took off of that field, and I put that much fertilizer back on every fall.
And then you're taking soil samples kind of to verify what you're doing, Dennis?
Yeah, just and about every 4 years we'll do variable rate samples on the fields to get it all even back, and then we'll do variable rate application to get it all level again.
Well, I'm going to copy off of Brad. We fertilize after the first and after the third cutting on our alfalfa. We do soil test every October of every year to be sure we're holding it right where we want it at. We use MES 10 instead of DAP because it has sulfur in it, and we put 2 pounds of boron per acre on all of our alfalfa ground. Our grass hay, we'll put some nitrogen on in March. If it's straight grass like Timothy or orchard grass, our mixed fields, we don't put hardly any nitrogen on, just basically what's in the MES 10.
Okay. Let me follow up. They talk about putting after the first cutting and after the third cutting, that the levels of potash in the soils are probably both in the high range. So you get a fair bit of background, a fair bit of breakdown potash in the soil. I mean, it becomes available over winter just with the freezing and thawing. So you typically, if you've got high levels in the soil to start with, you get a fair bit available for that first cutting. Gary made the comment, I think it was, about luxury consumption. If you put boron, you've already got high levels, and you put boron there in the early spring, the plant takes up more than it really needs. So it takes a bunch off in the first cutting, so that they were putting that replacement back on after the first, and then you get a couple more cuttings, and then after the third, and that's put in good shape going to the fall. And there's one other comment that I've forgotten. Oh, Clayton, in 2000, well, last so high, you said you did cut back on fertilizer a little bit.
We did. We had our soil test in a very high range on pretty much everything. And when our fertilizer company decided to make a lot of extra profit and they jacked the prices way up there, we basically didn't fertilize after the first cutting, just after the third cutting. And we actually maintained our soil test pretty well. But we have had 2 drought years in a row. So that's been a little less fertilizer needed because we've took less off. But we did have our soil built up in good enough shape that we could go that 1 year without putting much on because we had everything built up in really good shape.
So they worked for years and years to build it up and make sure there wasn't any shortages. And in essence, he was kind of putting some insurance in the money when fertilizer prices were lower, so he had that option. And now that's a very risky option if you don't have it built up to try to be cut back on it. John?
We fertilize after first and third. We grid sample 2.5 acre grids, everything every 2 years. We grid sample half of it 1 year and half of it the next year. And then we're variable rating our fertilizer. We're not near as fortunate as you guys. I don't have the services that I'm aware of like you guys do at the University of Kentucky. So we hire an agronomist that helps us determine what we need. They're the ones that do the grid sampling, but we don't buy anything from them. They don't sell anything other than their services. And I really like that because they don't have anything to sell me. They're giving me advice, and we pay good for it, but we can trust what they're telling us. They're not just trying to sell us something that's not going to be profitable. So we use our local co-ops for our fertilizer, but we have this agronomist that does all our fertility stuff and gives us our recommendations. And we're applying, we're doing a lot of micronutrients now in the last 2 years, and we're making a lot of trips over the fields to please him, thinking it's going to please us. Right now, we're not positive. We're seeing results, but it takes time. So we've been grid sampling and variable rating for 3 years now. And the one thing that we do have going for us, we're in a water issue. Lake Erie has water quality issues, so the government has been paying for an awful lot of the expenses for us to do this nutrient management plan to try to keep nutrients out of Lake Erie. So we do get reimbursed for a pretty significant amount of that stuff.
Other questions? Yes. So the question is about if there any of them are doing baleage or considering doing it, and do any of them have cattle?
We're all small squares. I do no baleage at all. But obviously, it's not 100% horse hay that we make because we get hay rained on occasionally and whatever. But we have an arrangement. My son-in-law's father raises replacement heifers. So when we have hay that becomes cattle quality hay, they come in and round bale it. We help them. We get it back to their farm and stuff, but that becomes his property at that point. We'll bale 5,000 bales of small squares of cattle hay just for a couple of friends, customers, and stuff. But past that, it goes in round bales. But the answer also, no, I don't do anything with baleage at all.
About 17 years ago, I bought my first inline wrapper. I give $18,000 for it way back then, and a neighbor come over and said, "How much hay you plan on wrapping every year?" I said, "None, ever." I don't want to wrap no hay. That's not my goal. But it is a good backup plan. My son has about 120 mama cows. The most we ever wrapped in 1 year was 1,000 rolls, and that done him 2 years. And we was blessed enough last year that I had to go buy a couple hundred rolls because I didn't wrap enough for him to have for his cows. I tell people we're partners on our cows. I own the front half and he owns the back half, which means I got to feed him and he gets the calves. But it's not really true. They're all his. But yes, baleage is a good option if the hay gets rained on or it's fixing to get rained on or something's wrong with it. If I was feeding my hay, I don't know that I'd ever try to get any dry. But if you're going to sell it to the horse people, it better be dry.
You're just kind of always ready if you need to. If it's not the proper moisture, you don't want to get rained on. You'd rather have it high quality than no quality.
I used to do some baleage when I'd have to. I didn't even own a roller. I finally bought a roller in 2018, and I've rolled 250 rolls since I bought it, but it's a backup machine, and I've got an individual wrapper. Used it so much that I finally just sold it to a neighbor and told him in the deal I could come back and borrow it if I ever needed it. But what happened to me, I was gearing up to do baleage, and about 5 or 6 years ago, all the dairies went out of business around us. And in 2018, I had a dairy 5 miles down the road. He would come and bale the alfalfa, roll the alfalfa. I would haul it to his place, and he would wrap it, and he paid me based on RFV. And I was getting an average of $100 for a 4x5 roll. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And he went out of business the next year. So, the baleage works great. It's for a backup plan.
We got some cattle, they get what don't make the square bale, you know, the cattle get, but the baleage works good. Our county conservation has a couple wrappers we can rent. Like, we're always cutting hay, and then if we can't get it dry enough for square bale, it's better just to go ahead and roll it and wrap it. I had a neighbor back in the summer, we was texting back and forth trying to get some hay to dry out, and it was cloudy, and that he texted me, "What did you get hay baled?" And I sent him a picture. I was wrapping mine, but I think his ended up getting rained on, so it really helps if you can go ahead and it make good cow feed.
Preservatives. Go ahead, Brad.
I don't have any experience. I've just mainly focused on trying to get it dry. We have moisture monitors on each baler, but it's something probably going to look into.
I got a farmer. I don't use it. I've tried. Every time I use it so rarely. Every time I tried, the applicator's tore up on the baler, so I got tired of fooling with it. I got one farmer. I buy his, and he thinks it's a miracle drug, and I think he starts spraying and baling at 30% moisture, and so I can't take his hay. I did buy some of his hay, carried it to Shelbyville, and the guys called me and said, "You need to come back and get this hay." And it was beautiful hay, and wasn't nothing wrong with it, but it was giving his horses diarrhea, and it was sprayed. And then just yesterday, I picked up 1,000 bales in the field from a neighbor this fall, and they were spraying it. And my guy called and said, "You know, some of this hay in this stack's moldy." And I thought, well, I didn't think that was supposed to happen with spray, so I'm not a big fan.
We have used propionic acid, we've used some of the dry powder inoculants, preservatives. We've tried lots of different things. In my opinion, it's really difficult to get it mixed in good enough that you're guaranteed that all the bales are the kind of condition they need to be in to go the places we're going to send our hay. If you was baling hay for your own dairy cows, I don't see anything wrong with it at all. But for the customers we have, it's not the right answer for us.
We used propionic acid for probably 10, 15 years. Like Dennis said, the applicators, they weren't reliable back then. These were computerized ones, and I don't need to get into all the problems, but I just absolutely hated getting preservative all over me when nozzles would plug up, the applicator wouldn't work right. The year we started with a fluffer, that was the last, we never used preservative after that. We felt that we were getting enough good out of that to take the place of good enough use out of the fluffer to take the place of preservative. Having said that, I'm actually considering preservative again, but it would be a powder. And I've talked to a few guys that are using it. The stuff is way better than it was, but I'm talking about the dry. So I'm considering it for next year. All the years I used it, I never had one customer ever complain about preservative, and we were never hiding it, that we were using it. In fact, I had a couple people, goats will never eat your hay if it's got preservative. And they'd take a bale and they'd just say, they just gobbled it right up. So I've never had a problem with a customer saying that it's poor quality hay. But what I did have a problem with was, and it's interesting, somebody said something about miracle drug. It became to me almost like cocaine. You get addicted to it. You start using it and you're afraid to not use it. But it was very inconsistent. When I used propionic acid, it would work maybe half the time it still didn't work. And I was absolutely certain that it was taking color out of our hay. The propionic acid, and there's propionic acid and there's acetic acid added to it, but the propionic acid is in somewhat burning your hay. It's, in my opinion, I know it was. Our color improved drastically when we quit using preservative. But the stuff they're using today, it's not propionic acid. Friends of mine that use it say they're having very good results with it. Another thing that could really help us, and one of the real reasons I'm looking at it, is if we've got a really big batch of hay that we got to dry, I'm going to have a lot bigger window to get that dry in if it's got preservative on it. If I put in 23% moisture hay or 22% moisture hay in the barn, I got maybe 2 days to get that dry before it starts showing some heat damage. But with the preservative, it'll hold that off a lot longer, so it'll give me more time to get the hay dry.
The product you're looking at, John.
It's made by Silo King, but I can't tell you exactly what it is. We're still looking into it. I've only talked to guys that are using it. I haven't actually talked to those guys yet. I'm thinking I'm going to run into them at the National Farm Machinery Show next week, and that's part of our goal for going there is to talk about that.
It's a fairly new product.
Yeah, it is a fairly new product.
What's that? What did you add?
It's a fairly new product.
And if you're using preservative or thinking about it, and you're worried about buying it, you're not wanting the hay. So in this publication that Roy Lawrence is the lead author, on the back, it has common myths about alfalfa for horses. And one is preservative-treated hay isn't safe for horses. And the answer is most preservatives applied to horse hay contain organic acid, so that would be like propionic acid, that are the same as those found in the horse's gastrointestinal tract. Application preservatives help produce mold-free hay. Initially, some horses may prefer hay without preservative, but if they're not given a choice, horses will consume the same amount of preservative-treated hay as non-treated hay. And it can have a little bit of smell to it, that's what she's talking about, and she's done preference studies with giving both. So in essence, if someone's asking you about it, then you can give them this publication and say, here's the answer from the experts as far as any issues in animals consuming it. Another question?
I just want to add
Yes, Ellis.
to that acid question. We spray all of our hay. We always have sprayed all of our hay. We use the Harvest Tech application. We use hay green.
So Harvest Tech is the applicator, and Hay Green is the product.
Hay green comes out of Jordan Ag Supply in Wisconsin.
Okay, Jordan Ag Supply, repeat this for folks.
It is a propionic acid with citric acid. So the product looks green, but it also preserves the color. Like I said, we ship our hay all over. Our customers never complain about an acid or it's not even hay.
Okay.
The comment about the 30% growth, 30%, they know that 30% moisture. If they know that 30% moisture, that is the user abusing that as abusing the acid. They're not, it's not going to keep 30%. You got to, we have seen 22, you smell it above 22%. I don't care if you spray it for the mold.
Okay, so the comment is the Weeses use preservative, but they don't go over 22%. So they're not trying to preserve wet hay, just some that is a bit damp, and they're ensuring it keeps that quality. There was, Gary, you had a question?
Can I just add one comment to that? I think that you need to be really conscious of if you're talking about dew moisture or stem moisture. If you're talking about stem moisture, sometimes 18% won't keep, and if you're talking about dew moisture, 25% a lot of times will keep. So whether you're talking about dew moisture or stem moisture is a huge factor with preservative, and any hay.
And I'm not trying to discourage you from the silo king, but our neighbor had a silo king. We built right beside him with our acid, and our hay would keep. That's just the experience that we had. We wanted to do a side-by-side comparison.
So at least what the product you use from them.
The dry ocular, they call it, the dry did not work. In our area, it did not work.
Gary, you have a question or comment?
I would be interested in what one product or principle or piece of equipment has made the biggest positive economic difference to the program.
The product or equipment that's made the biggest difference. If each of you make a comment on that, or if you can't think of one, give one of them that you.
I don't know how I'm not sure I would bale hay if there wasn't bale stackers. It is just a huge thing. Now with bale bearing, that's a big game changer, but again, I'm not a believer in it in my area. I would have too many problems. But the bale wagon is an amazing piece of equipment for us, and especially the newer stuff. It's unbelievable what that's done for us. I would say the second thing would be fluffing hay.
I'm glad we get to pick two. My first one is also the bell wagon. It's a complete package. I don't know any way I could do the volume I do without the bell wagon. And my second would be Roundup Ready Alfalfa.
One, two, that sounds like the trend. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just add on, bale stacker, Roundup Ready Alfalfa, and for me, when I quit growing tobacco, is the sprayer. I started spraying my alfalfa a lot more because I wasn't distracted by tobacco, and I started growing a lot better alfalfa when I had time to keep it sprayed. And
You mean like spraying for alfalfa, weed boll, or?
insects and weeds, because tobacco and alfalfa just don't get along good together.
You can do 10, Brad, since we're adding a few more.
We were doing a lot of hay and straw by hand, with the tobacco wagons, and I was talking to an older guy from Lexington, been in the hay and straw business since the 70s, he said, you need to get a bale bearing. So I looked into it, and it's been a game changer for me. We doubled our production, and we get home before dark a lot of times, so it's a big difference. We're putting in 21 bale bundles, and the first year I had a machine, I done 4,600 bundles with one machine, so it's definitely been a game changer for us.
Brad, John mentioned earlier he's concerned with that moisture in those interior bales. Have you ever had any issues, and if not, how have you tried to make sure you did not?
We're baling our hay drier, we're more cautious. We're probably losing more alfalfa leaves, but so far I haven't had a customer that wanted any hay tested, and so growing up on the dairy farm, we wanted to keep those leaves, and we didn't use a tedder, but now we're just really trying to get dry hay. A lot of times we're baling 12% or lower moisture, and
So customers aren't complaining, and you get some free fertilizer when those leaves do up all the ground.
well, the bale bearing does put the bales tighter, and we're gaining 100 bales per trailer because we're 7 bales wide instead of 6. There's definitely not as much air because with that bale wagon, when you dump it, those bales will loosen up, and a lot of guys are leaving areas between their stacks, and with the bundles, we don't have none of that, so you got to bale it dry. That is something we've learned, when we was doing it by hand, we could put salt on them or do whatever. But you got to get it right in the field, so.
I'd like to make a comment about what he said. Not our idea, I don't know where we got it, but every baler we buy, we have a spike put on the spear, and it puts a hole through the bale that you could run a broom handle through. And he's talking about those bale stacks opening up, and if your hay is a little bit heavy, especially your bottom layer or two, it's so tight it can't breathe. That hole in the bale makes a difference, lets it breathe. And so I delivered a load to a lady a few years ago, and she said, this hay is more brown. She said, and I noticed it don't have those holes in it. And I had bought a new baler and forgot to have the spike put on it. And but we have a guy in our community that will put a spike on the plunger, and it puts a hole through every bale.
So it's just a few inch spike, and every time it punches,
It's like a 6-inch spike, and every time it plunges, it puts a hole in the bale, in that deal, and so you got a hole all the way through the bale.
yes, sir.
Back up a little bit, this is a rather long question. We have customers that come and pick up hay out of the field. We have customers that will not buy a bale from us until it's set in the barn 2 months, been through a swell. And I kind of want to know what your all's policies on selling hay like that. Do you store all of your hay and then go through a sweat before you sell to anybody? And if you've got hay that you think is high moisture in the barn, do you monitor that hay and how do you all monitor it to see what it is?
The question relates to the people that are listening to this later with moisture. And you let it go through a sweat in the barn, do you monitor it in the barn? How are you trying to make sure that you lose any moisture that might be there once you put it in the barn? Brad?
We've had hay go bad on the van trailers, especially going to South Florida. It gets real hot down there, so, just our experience, it needs to be baled 3 weeks or a month, before you put it on that trailer. I don't know, I guess we've had some other hay, maybe some Timothy the horse didn't want to eat, and it go through some real hard freezes, and the hay would change, and they would eat it. So, I think it is good to let your hay cure out before you sell it.
Yeah, my policy is I put it in the barn and it sets for 30 days before I'll sell it. I will sell it, but I tell people it's your hay. Don't call me back if it don't keep. The way if I do have a stack that I think's a little wet, I just go by there every day and stick my arm in there and see how hot it's getting and hope the barn don't burn down.
Okay, just as we're transitioning, you can measure temperature, but if you stick a steel rod into a bale or between bales, leave it there for a minute, pull it out, grab it with your hand, you can hold it typically less than 140. 140 is scalding, if you're scalding a chicken or something. If you can't hold it, then it's getting a little bit warm. In fact, if you can't hold it but a second, you probably better call the fire department. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, first of all, we don't let anybody pick up any hay in our fields but us. I really don't want nobody out there in the way. And I don't mean that in a crude way, but our stuff is moving pretty quick, so we don't want anything else in the field. I love for my hay to be in the barn at least 30 days. Every now and then we'll run low in the spring, and when we start baling, we have to move some quicker than 30 days. We always make sure it got baled really good shape and everything's good. Now, as far as putting hay in the barn that I'm concerned about, that happens from time to time. We get a cloudy day, it didn't dry as good as we was hoping it would, and the next day it's going to rain. We have, I think they're called compost thermometers, and we can stick them in, they're long thermometers, and we can stick them in the hay, and I can go by 2 or 3 times a day and take a glance at them, and that'll kind of let us know where we're at there. We haven't had a problem in a long, long time, but it's good to be safe. But we like for our hay to be 30 days old. We don't always get what we like, but that's what we like.
When you're putting the stack down, you're putting some plastic and some straw. Tell me how you're doing that and what.
Okay, that's preserving our bottom bales. All of our barns have gravel floors, and it's packed tight. I'll just say that. And we put a layer of meal plastic, and we put one full bale of straw per stack. The stack is about 8 foot by 12 foot. So the piece of plastic's about that size, and we use a full bale of straw shook out on that piece of plastic, and that pretty well preserves all our bottom bales. We have very, very few bottom bales that go bad. If they get dumped off the plastic, or if the straw isn't shook out real good and even, or something like that, we might have a problem, but very few bottom bales that we can't use.
Plastic's keeping the moisture from the ground, and the straw, any little bit of moisture might be there is dissipating out from underneath the sack, is that right?
That's right. Now, if you bale hay too wet, the bottom bales won't keep either. That won't work. So if it's too wet, we'll still lose the bottom bales. But in general, that works good. It's not as good as what John does now. He's going to make me look bad.
No, we don't let anybody pick up bales in our field for the same reasons Clayton's talking about, so that doesn't happen. Before I had a hay dryer, I generally wanted the hay to be in the barn for about a month. But basically every batch of hay that we make, every day we make hay, and it's my son-in-law now because he's a lot younger than I am, climbs up on those stacks every single morning. When he comes over, that's the first thing he does in the morning, climbs up on the stacks, he's pulling the top bale out, reaching down to see and it's not just heat, but it's moisture. How much moisture does it feel like? Is it really getting tough up there? The moisture seems to go to the top, although the bottom bales spoil if you got a problem, but I really think that's as much because of the temperature difference between the hay and the floor. But we're checking that every day, and sometimes we're gonna take hay back out of the barn and run it through the dryer because we're not satisfied with the way it feels. We all make mistakes. But as far as shipping it, I used to want it to be in the barn for at least 3 or 4 weeks. If it's not really early made hay and we're very comfortable with it, we'll ship it after 10 days. But if I'm shipping it after 10 days, or in just 10 days, I'll run it through the dryer for maybe 10 minutes. And that's just heating it up a little bit, cooling it back down. We've not had one bit of problem with that. So we can just force all that air through it. So it's actually on that dryer between the drying chamber and the cooling floor. It's on there for an hour and 20 minutes between both. So we're getting a lot of air through it, and and I've done that. Driver will come and I'm not really crazy about what I'm gonna load here, so I'll run it through the dryer before I load them, and I've had very good luck with that. As far as the floor, we used to use chaff and plastic. We did it for quite a few years. A friend of mine asphalted his barn, and it just worked phenomenal. We've asphalted all our barns, and asphalt is far better for hay storage than concrete is. I think a lot of it has to do with the temperature. You always will see that the snow will melt off asphalt before it melts off concrete. Something to do with being dark, something to do with it breathing, but asphalt works far better than concrete, and all of our I take that back. I have one barn that I rent that I've been renting for 40 years, and I don't even pay them enough to pay the property tax on the barn, but it's rented from a trust. But anyway, that barn is chaff and plastic, and if I'd have known I'd had that barn for this 30-some years, or close to going on 40 years, I would have asphalted it way back then.
So is there less moisture or no moisture coming through asphalt that can come through concrete still?
I don't know that, I don't believe it's actually moisture coming through. I think it sweats. I think the concrete sweats because it's colder, and you're getting like a sweat between the warm hay that you put on the cold concrete. But I don't think it's actually moisture coming through the concrete. It's from the temperature differential. But concrete does spoil. You'll see, or excuse me, sweat. You'll see it get wet in the spring. You don't see that in the asphalt.
And just in stacks, I know like your hay is stacked on edge, so it's all on edge going up, so you get some moisture moving through. John, is yours hay in the bales on edge?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay. So you get some movement up through those stacks rather than the hay being flat. Question here? Yes, sir.
With storage starting out, did you already have barns set up, or like John, you mentioned renting barns? Is that you pay like per bale per month on it? Or?
storage start now, when they were just getting started into this, is the question.
We rented a lot of mows from people, and it was just a flat rate. I don't think we ever paid by the bale. We just, I'd look at it and say, I'll give you this much. And a lot of old barns around us, they weren't using the mows, and it was very reasonable. But this barn that I happen to still be renting, it's 60 by 175. It was a horse riding arena. The guy got out of horses. It was a mile down the road from where we lived, which is 15 miles from where I live today. But because that barn, and this was a very wealthy man, I was paying $1,200 a year for that barn. And today I'm paying, and before he died, I was up to $1,500. He's been dead over 10 years. I'm renting it from a bank trust, and it's still the same price. I pay about that much in property taxes on my other barn per year. So.
Other comments about what kind of barns you started, storage you started?
We started putting hay anywhere we could put it, an old tobacco barn or tool shed or anything we could put it in. The first real hay barn I built on the farm that I'm on now, we cut all the timber off the farm and had it sawed and built the barn ourselves. And it was a 60 by 120, and it cost me $15,000. So they're quite a bit more expensive than it now, but that's kind of where we started. But we put hay in just about anything that's got a roof on it a long time ago.
Yeah, I forgot that part. We had 2 or 3 tobacco barns that we weren't using, 3 stock barns, a car garage, and 2 houses. And the only place we didn't put straw was in the attic of the houses, and we tried, but it was just too hard to get the bales up the stairs. But on the tobacco barns, we did stack it to the peak, and we handed every bale up like a stick of tobacco, and we packed that thing full. That's what you do when you're young and dumb.
I was already renting a lot of tobacco barns, a lot of producers quitting, and we've been able to put down plastic and straw. We like the rye straw the best, and then some tobacco barns we put up some plastic to keep the sun out, but if you're facing the east or whatever, it helps. But that's on the rate, on the tobacco barns, a lot of times we was paying like 10, 15 cents a stick, depends on what they hold. And some of these farms I was renting, I was already paying the rent on the tobacco barns anyway. So it's of course with tobacco, we was only using them a couple months out of the year. With the hay, you used them all year. So I've had some landowners that asked for more money.
Do we have time for one more question? How big is the asphalt? John? That's not that. We recorded that.
The asphalt's put in two courses. The first course is a pretty heavy course of stone and asphalt. That one I think is 2.5 inches and then 1.5 inches. So it's a total of 4 inches. And that may not sound like enough, but you would be amazed at how well asphalt holds up inside a barn. It's not exposed to the sun. We've got our oldest barn has been in there probably 20 years, and you'd really have to look to find any cracks in it. It holds up very, very well in a barn.
Hey, Ray, I want to make a statement. Hadn't nobody said nothing about this, but one point I want to make is get your money. There's no need to do all this work, and then they'll mail you a check that you never get. And like he said, new customers, I'm cash the first year till I get to know you. And one thing I got looking back at how many bad checks I'd gotten, all my bad checks came from people I'd been doing business with for a long time. And then there was that one time they couldn't meet me to give me a check. I'll mail it to you. And I never saw them again. And it was people I thought were my friends. But another thing I'll say, I don't know. I think maybe I've sold $5 million worth of hay and straw, and I've got $15,000 in bad collections, and that's not a bad rate. But get your money.